Hello and welcome back. It's Rob Chadwick, Nick Copson and Bill Martin here with Stop the Press. First time we've been back together since Christmas, since about December. Hello guys.
Hello Rob.
Hello everyone.
And we are going to do an episode today where we talk about our predictions for the year, which I personally have found quite difficult because I kind of I don't know, but these two geniuses have come up with something for us this time anyway. So
I think nobody really knows, do they?
That's the point, isn't it? I could just make up anything, really.
And I think going through the process of thinking about it made me realise, and since the time I came out of working in the press full time, an awful lot has happened very quickly. Very few of which I think I would have predicted. So, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. But it'll be fun to have a crack at it anyway. So before we do that, let's do a little bit of catching up on what we've been up to over the last couple of months or so. Bill's done the most out of us. Nick and I went and had a curry.
Or the least.
Well, whichever way you want to look at it. Yeah.
You're horizontal.
I spent a lot of time horizontal.
Been on a cruise.
I have been on a cruise. Not a type of holiday I would have chosen, but I had an opportunity to go. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, Caribbean, what's not to like?
Yeah, nice and warm. It's been grim.
Very warm. Climbed a volcano.
Nice.
Kayak through a mangrove swamp.
And went on a Easy Rider motorbike.
Yeah, electric one.
And that's really difficult.
It was harder than I thought it would be.
It feels like it would be difficult.
Yeah.
I struggled with a racer cycle. I know you cycle, Nick, but I struggle with a racer. It's too responsive. I was all over the road when I tried it. I've gone back to mountain bike. I couldn't do it properly.
My last couple of months or month even was almost the polar opposite of Bill's actually in terms of climate expenditure activities.
You've done nothing.
Yeah, well, I hibernated.
Much the same for me. Yeah.
I got to January 1 and realised I'd overspent during Christmas anyway, and also it was the longest pay cycle of the calendar year because you get paid for Christmas for most people anyway, and it was a long January. So yeah, I had no choice but to hibernate. Actually, to be honest, and I quite enjoyed it.
Did either of you do dry January?
No.
No.
Good.
I don't really.
Therefore, I still like you both.
It's the time of the year you most need a drink. It's grim out there,
Absolutely.
isn't it?
I also barely drink really anyway, so it's not much of a push to go dry, to be honest.
Yeah, up until the weekend just gone, I've not really been drinking that much anyway. But yeah, just is what it is, isn't it? Anyway, shall we crack on? Who wants to bring the first thing to the table? Nick, go on. You said you've got a few, so let's start with something that you've bought today.
Well, it's a shame this is February that we're doing this recorded because most of my predictions have actually already happened. But I'll
That's the easiest way of making predictions.
I'll expand on them, and I'll predict that. And it's headline news right now, of course, around the world, which is that Trump. The new president of the United States of America will effectively de-globalize the world or unglobalize the world, whatever the correct word is, by the end of the year. Mostly through the tariffs that he's imposing on is it Mexico, China, and Canada. But it looks like his tariff on Europe is imminent as well. It looks like the UK might be spared that blow. But from an economic point of view,
cost.
Correct, yeah. But from an economic point of view, all this will probably likely to do, is to inflate America's economy, aggressively so. Devalue the dollar. It might have impacts on other monetary sort of systems, and it'll cause chaos amongst international trade when. The world over the last 50, 60, 70, 80 years has made great strides in that area and created growth. And Mr. Trump will, take us back, or certainly take America back, but he'll probably, because it's a world economy, unfortunately, take everyone back. So in terms of deglobalization.
Yeah, it does feel, my prediction was, one of them was going to be that there was going to be some isolationism and it was going to get more and more like that for every country from now on. I think on the positive side of that, it would be good if we weren't importing tomatoes from Kenya. that would be a good thing, because that, in terms of the environmental cost, is not a good thing. So I can see the positives of making economies more self-reliant. The negative of being of the world economy became really clear when the Ukraine war broke out and everyone panicked about fuel because suddenly we weren't going to buy Russian fuel. And being that independent on each other can create an environment where you aren't able to say, no, you can't do that to people like Vladimir Putin. So I can also see the positive sides of that.
Yes,
I do understand what you're saying about like globalization being good generally and leads to more tolerance, but I can also see some positives.
It's sort of an idyllic view now, isn't it? Self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
You'd have thought that this country would be strong enough and have enough agricultural capacity and that sort of thing to be self-sufficient, but we're a million miles away from that. Mainly because, as we've advanced towards, we are very reliant on importing food, energy, you name it.
We are.
And America will get closer to it than we will, but they are still very much reliant on other markets and other countries. So it is an idyllic view that Trump's got.
It's a risk as well, isn't it?
Because they'll somehow be able to create their own, like I said, a self-supporting, economy. It's just completely unrealistic.
The other way of looking at it, and it was quite interesting. I was listening to the radio this morning, and someone in Germany, as a German politician, was on the radio and was talking about it. And he said, "Well, Trump's a bully," and so the first thing you do is you stand up to him and say, "We'll do the same back," and then you look at the negotiation after that. And the subtext was that actually Trump doesn't really want to do tariffs; he just wants to give himself the upper hand in any bargaining positions that are about to come about.
Yeah, well, that would be classic Trump, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
and it looks as if Canada are going to stand up to him, doesn't it? It doesn't. We don't know what Mexico are going to do yet, but
no, or China.
Is it all just one? It's Trump playing politics. He's sort of saying, "Well, I said I'd do this. I'm going to do it," and he kind of lets it play out. It doesn't. He
doesn't really know what's going to happen, does he?
And he seems to have linked tariffs on both the north and south border of the country to illegal immigration.
I know,
and fentanyl.
And and I think he's also wielding power, probably confidently backed by Elon Musk and a few other individuals. And I feel it's just it almost feels like a bit of a game, as well as combined with delivering on what he said he would do, which actually I advocate as a politician. I feel they should be doing that.
They should be delivering, yeah.
But part of it's quite alarming, isn't it? The whole Canada should just become the 51st state, and Denmark should give me Greenland, and I'm gonna change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. That's done, apparently.
I didn't know you could just do. I thought maps counted for something. I didn't know you could just change names on a whim like that. Well, I guess America own it, do they?
I don't know.
They must own it to be able to change it.
I think the problem here is, again, I bring Elon Musk into it again with his immense, power and influence here. That the pair of those two, and Trump especially, can just say whatever they want now, and almost no one bats an eyelid.
Yeah.
And no one's going to challenge them in any way. It's either hot air or it's backed up, but they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, and I think
that's a worrying part of it.
Yeah, and I think I'm part of the problem because I tend to just laugh at it because it's just so mad. But actually, probably shouldn't be laughing because it is mad, and actually they're doing it. And maybe I should be more scared than I am. But I kind of just look at it and go, well, this won't work out, will it? We'll go back to normal sooner or later.
I'm scared.
But did you think he would be re-elected?
Oh yeah.
You see, 18 months ago I didn't. I thought there's absolutely no way the states will re-elect him.
Oh, maybe 18 months ago I didn't, but certainly within the last 12 months I've thought I thought he'd definitely win against Kamala when it got to that, and against Biden. Yeah, definitely.
But you can see an increasingly large role for the press, can't you, in countering Trump's truth, or certainly countering whatever it is they are saying. Because you're right, between him and Musk, they can say whatever they want, and no one really has the power to challenge that. And it doesn't appear from over here, from what I can see at the minute, it looks like you've got quite an acquiescent press over there in terms of the kind of going with it, because Trump's way is the way at the minute. There's no other way.
Well, it's not helped by the fact that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Another media powerful, wealthy, influential person. Owning and can have a say on the editorial direction of one of the largest, newspapers, news companies in the Western world.
It's quite depressing seeing those guys sat in a row behind him at the inauguration. I thought that was quite a depressing moment of the inauguration, kind of almost like, well, it is the rich. The reason that these people, that Trump's followers follow into such a degree is the drain the swamp thing. But for me, it just feels like they're just creating another swamp, which is even more corrupt and even more all over the place. Because these people, Trump's apparently Musk's wealth has gone up by over 100 billion since Trump got voted in November. Yeah. I mean, there's money in it for them.
They're doing it for commercial gain.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Facebook has gone back to unregulation or very, very light touch regulation since it as well. And there's one reason behind that, and that is because what's his name is trying to curry favour. What's his name? Zuckerberg is trying to curry favour with Trump, isn't he? I mean, that's the bottom line.
They can make money out of it.
Yeah, because he knows that if he doesn't curry favour with Trump, then Trump will go after him, and his vast wealth might get diminished a little bit.
There was a sketch in the sort of rebirth of Spitting Image. I don't know if you watched that. When it featured Richard Branson, who is actually a small fry compared to these guys now, isn't he? But it was Branson, Bezos, and one other, I can't remember who it was, probably Zuckerberg, who were actually in space on their own spaceship, looking down at Earth, saying, "Oh, why don't we try this?" And then sort of bursting into laughter. Why don't we, literally playing with the world as a toy.
I know.
So,
well, it's depressing.
The interesting thing about
maybe
the
that was
inauguration,
quite visionary.
The interesting thing about the inauguration, which I didn't really watch, I just heard a lot about it on the radio. But where was Rupert Murdoch? Is he was always like Trump's ear, wasn't he, in years gone by? But it feels like the old guard have very much taken a back step now.
Yeah, it's social media channels now.
It's the social media channels now. Yeah. It's the influencers now.
But that really demonstrates, doesn't it, how powerful this sort of new, Trump's administration, whatever it is, his coterie of acolytes have become. Because, those old traditional brands who might have questioned what was going on and that sort of thing, I'm not saying they've become irrelevant, but they are not as relevant as they once were, and they're certainly not as powerful as they once were, are they? Because, Truth Social, X, you name it, they can effectively say what they like.
Yeah.
And
one of the
who's to challenge them now?
Yeah,
no,
and
right.
one of the problems with journalism on these social media channels is the fact that it's becoming, well, if you're right wing, you're on Twitter, and if you're left wing, you're on Blue Sky, and never the twain shall meet, and no one really challenges each other. So both sides are getting more and more radical as a result.
Yeah,
and it just feels like, as you said earlier on, there is a massive role for independent journalism in this year and the next few years coming up to try and hold people to account. Which brings me to your next predictions, Bill. You were talking earlier on about individual journalism and stuff.
Well, I suppose they're kind of connected, my two predictions within media for in the next year or so, I'd have thought. I think increasingly we're going to see the end of major print brands. And I guess you could almost plot which ones they'd be. And when I say major, I mean both in regional and eventually national terms, because if you look at circulation figures across the whole of the Western world, actually, on regional and national titles, you must be, I mean, I'm guessing with the actual maths, but you must be getting to the point now where the print production costs of some of these brands is outweighing even the circulation cost. I mean, it used to be the absolute cash cow for some of the organisations I worked in, Cover Price, you'll remember that, Nick. And I guess print revenues are still a very important part of some of the larger media companies. But you've got to think, I think anyway, you're going to see increasing numbers of titles, print titles closing, Some of them will continue to exist in digital form, I expect. But I reckon you'll see an expansion in the breadth and the geography of print brand associated websites. So I think, a lot of the smaller websites will close. We've already seen that down here, haven't we? In terms of the smaller websites have become county-wide live sites or whatever it is.
Yep.
I think that'll accelerate. Which is sad if you're sort of, if you're rooted in newspapers like I am, but inevitable too. I think that we'll see a lot of that in the next 2 years. Will we see a big national title?
That was going to be my question to you, actually.
Yeah,
Question.
who's vulnerable? If we are going to see a big national title, like a newspaper or a big magazine, where do you see the vulnerabilities?
In the Sundays, I would have thought. There's a couple of Sundays. I mean, the Observer recently just sold, isn't it? It's Tortoise, and that's the thing. If the circulation figure I saw a couple of weeks ago, was tiny, that would become a labour of love to anyone, wouldn't it? Well, we're probably a way off seeing any of the really big beasts go, but with circulation in 20% decline year on year, and as a majority of lost 17%, I think it was the end of last year, they're not going to be around forever, I think.
Well, it's an I mean, if you were mathematically minded, it would be an easy sum to do, wouldn't it? 20% decline. If that trend
you
continues,
work it out.
You just work it out. And you go right. It's 2027.
It's that moment for that one. That one,
exactly.
Yeah.
Where it just becomes, they're not a charity. It becomes unviable, doesn't it? So, it'd be interesting to work out when that was. Actually, I might take that away as homework for next time.
Yeah, excellent. I like saying your homework. It's good. I am a teacher after all, so that's ideal. Go and do that, Nick, please.
All right, I will take that task on. I will predict. The next one is a genuine prediction.
And don't be using AI for it either. Do it properly.
Oh, that'd be interesting as well.
Oh, yeah.
Do it yourself, then
Exactly.
use AI.
Yeah.
I might even do it while we're doing this podcast. We'll see what happens.
That sounds a good idea. And that was going to bring you to you were predicting the rise of individuals being a bit more focused.
Again,
and news content as sort of citizen journalism.
I think news at some point. I mean, we've seen this happening already in some areas of the UK and the rest of Europe, haven't we? But at some point, news is going to have to be separated from the old traditional models of there being a newsroom, and once people stop trying to create what we used to have, then and the focus actually becomes on simply the content, and let's not even use the word content. Let's use the news. What is happening? How can we report that fairly and accurately? When you go back to the basics on that, and that'll be one man or woman bands, I would have thought. In digital form, I'd have thought you've got to think that they would become the more relevant. Done well, they'd become the more relevant and reliable media. Even in a city like the one we're sat in now, in Plymouth, I can see a market for something like that already.
Yeah. When we sort of covered that briefly, didn't we, on our very first episode, in terms of where does the opportunity sit for press in the future, and it is being a voice of hope against the groundswell of bullshit coming off X.
Yeah,
and
the grounds, the different people who know the difference between facts and feelings. And funnily enough, as over the period we've been away, I've watched a few episodes of Newswipe. Back from 2010 and so, and one of them was an excellent episode where Charlie Brooker was exploring the aftermath of Princess Di and the fact that at that point news went from being people sat behind desks telling you what had happened to people interviewing the member of public about how they feel about what had happened. And I going on from what you've just predicted, Bill, of that individual person, I see a real market for people who just focus on what has happened and take all of the bullshit, this is how people feel about it, out of the news. There's a difference between facts and feelings, and it's getting mixed up at the moment in terms of news.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I think a lot of the operations that emerge will be non-profit.
Yeah. it can only be, can't it? Because people won't pay for it.
Because I think the revenue model around news is still unproven.
Donation type stuff, like The Guardian is at the moment, where they ask you to donate rather than
possibly
actually kind of
charge
you to go onto it.
I don't know how much revenue they generate from donation and things like that. But
I suspect it would. I suspect there is a model there, but I suspect it would still have to be backed by some kind of
subscription,
or wealthy donor somewhere, or I don't know what that looks like, but because there's still massive costs attached to news generation, isn't there? Really, and news reporting. So, but even if it's not in print, it's still
journalists want to be paid.
Yeah.
Proper investigative journalism takes a long time and generates a relatively small amount of content in the greater scheme of things.
Yeah, and that, I think the other thing we'll see even more definition of is that you'll get what you pay for in terms of quality. So I mean, it's out there now, isn't it? You can buy quality journalism, quality analysis, and that sort of stuff. Not everyone wants to. I mean, there was an interesting interview with Jim Mullen over the weekend that I read when he said, a lot of Reach's title readers don't want to pay for news and that sort of stuff. So and they like the sort of content that's going out on the Reach website. Something. And I think that's a fair enough point. Yeah, there are a lot of people who don't want to pay for it, but I think increasingly the sort of swamp of freely available content, whether that's platform based or whether it's social media, is going to get thicker and thicker because you're going to have AI, generative AI churning out who knows what. So I think increasingly, if you value quality journalism, you are going to have to pay for it. And I think increasingly it's going to become more expensive. You can see the same on TV, can't you? I think on the old classic linear channels, some days of the week now, I think they've sort of given up trying to put on a set of programmes between 7 and 10 o'clock at night because they know no one's going to watch them.
Watch anyway, exactly. Yeah.
So they just fill it up with guff.
But it's it's an interesting sort of argument though that says that I believe that quality always wins out. It might take a long time for the overriding kind of behaviours of humanity to sort of recognise and realise that in any new change. But I feel that quality always wins out. Eventually people will realise that they're being fed crap, and they're willing to then to go seek out and ultimately pay for something that is going to deliver better value for them.
Well, I hope so. So. So it's almost like you wrote the script for me there, Bill, starting to talk about a generative AI. It was almost like you thought, I'll give Rob a segue so we can move to the next prediction, because I know Nick had something to predict about AI.
Well, I mean, it's already infiltrated all of our lives already in ways that we either know about or even we don't, and we're just being fed it and we don't know. And I think that probably moves on to my prediction is that by the end of the year, and it feels far too soon, but who knows, it might already exist. I mean, Bill, I don't know if you think it already exists already or not, but I feel that there will be some kind of AI verification process by the end of the year, whereby if you're publishing content, enabling content to be accessed, or if you're a publishing platform in some way, shape or form, there's some kind of verification process where you have to, and I don't know how that works, by the way, so don't challenge me on that, but somehow you have to legitimately prove that you either were responsible for this as a human being, or it come from AI and machine learning or something, so that if you're then consuming it on the other end, the receiver, as it were, maybe it has like a flag on it to say this is AI generated or it's human generated. I don't know what that looks like yet, but just something that defines the line between the two. Because there's a danger, I think, that almost everything could be AI generated.
Yeah.
Right? And you wouldn't know any different, right? There's a danger, and it's moving that fast. It really is moving that fast.
Well, I'm not sure you wouldn't know any different. And I think the teacher among us would be able to say that sometimes you do know different.
Well, you're alluding to the fact that I caught one of my, well, I think I've caught one. I haven't raised it with them yet, but I think I caught one of my students with the most obvious AI-generated essay this week. But, I'll have a chat this week and we'll find out, won't we? Maybe I'll report back when we record next time. But I'm pretty certain, yeah. Basically, can you write me an essay about this? And it was fantastic, which was not in character with the previous work. Let's put it that way. Anyway, let's move on before I get in trouble at work.
It takes copy-paste to a whole new level, doesn't it? Yeah.
And it's so difficult because what am I actually going to... And this, it is relevant to the news content because what am I actually going to do? I'm going to challenge it. But if they then dig their heels in and say, no, I wrote that, where do I go with that? How do I find out differently? And this comes back to what you've just predicted, Nick, that actually we need something that says this is definitely AI generated, where you can put it into an engine and say, and you can already do that. I can copy that into something and then it will tell me the chances of it being AI generated. But it's not definitive.
No. And there's nothing wrong with, I think, augmenting your voice or your content, whatever you're doing, with AI. I use it to myself, and we all do probably in some way, to give us a head start on something or to...
I use it to tidy up. So
yeah, exactly.
I'll write a brief, an assignment brief, and then I say, can you tidy this up for me? Can you do this, and this, and make sure it's really easy for a 16-year-old to follow? And it does make a big difference.
And I think that's fine. Blending between the two, I think, makes a lot of sense. It's the best of humanity combined with the best of...
Yeah.
Technology, should we say, right? And that's how we should probably work moving forwards. But it's when it's one or the other. I think we need to know.
Yeah.
Your example there about your student. I in my current employment, we had a grievance raised. In the form of a letter, a document, essentially. And it was. To your point, it was an incredible. It looked like it had been raised by a lawyer, basically, right? And but the guy who raised it could barely string a sentence together, let alone write one, right? So when it was challenged, of course, he couldn't even reference or remember what was in the context of the grievance, let alone how it was spelled. So it's just examples like that. It's I don't know where we go with that because that's not essentially bad or good. He's used it to do a job, but you just need to know.
I suppose it democratises things to a degree. So if you want to be a journalist and you struggle with your spelling and grammar, and there could be many reasons behind that, if you can write in a creative and interesting way and you can investigate and stuff, but you just can't necessarily write it in a way where it's immediately fit for print, AI can help you by putting it into that fit for print. So you can become a journalist and work at a reasonably high level despite struggling with your spelling and grammar. That feels like a decent thing as people who've worked in the business. Would you agree?
Yeah, but those tools have existed in different forms already, haven't they, for several years? And, I always think one of the misconceptions about good journalists is that they were good writers. Some of them were, some of them weren't. Some of the best journalists I knew really, really struggled with their writing and things like that. But there was a support system around them to help with that. Journalism is quite often confused by people who want to be writers. People used to come to me and I'd say, well, why are you here? They'd say, oh, well, I want to be a writer. And that wasn't really the answer I wanted because I didn't want writers. I wanted
investigators.
I wanted journalists. I wanted inquisitive minds, people who wanted to know why things were being done the way they were, etc., not people who, were worried about...
That makes total sense.
Their grammar and their syntax.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course that's a good thing. It's like I've never used AI to help me with anything yet, but I'm sure I will. When my daughter was working at home, she was working in sales. I would see her using Chat GPT, is it? Mm-hmm. She would use that in order to put together pictures and that sort of thing. Brilliant.
Yeah.
You've got no issues with that at all.
I'll tell you what's really good as well, the design stuff. So if I know you work at a gym and you could be putting together kind of posters and stuff, and it's very good at that sort of thing as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's really good.
But it's a step then, isn't it, into AI-generated articles that are going to be published in, the whatever, in credible news brands, whether that's print or something like that. I really battle with that. Maybe AI is going to be, used to generate, the top 50 Beatles song ever and that sort of stuff. Okay, fair enough. That kind of works, doesn't it? But once you get into long form content or the sort of stuff that I think that AI is capable of generating content now, that makes me deeply uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with that.
So, before I bring my sport prediction
yeah.
to close off the thing, have we got anything else we'd like to predict for the year ahead?
I could chuck one in there if you want. Very quick. It's a very short one, by the way, and it actually fits the topic and the medium itself. Fits
the brief.
Fits the brief. Yeah.
First time for everything.
Correct. I'm going to go with the rise of a phrase that I feel will enter our vernacular a bit more by the end of the year, which is brain rot.
Right. Okay, what's brain rot?
Brain rot is when we're consuming so much short form content that we are fueling that sort of dopamine rush for a start. Our attention spans get shorter and shorter and shorter, and we're basically just killing our brain. Short form content being the kind of stuff that TikTok lays onto us, and YouTube and Shorts and Facebook Shorts, all that sort of stuff. And I go on them myself sometimes, and I find myself just mindlessly scrolling, just waiting to see what the next one might be. It might be more interesting, or just next one and the next one. My kids do it, and I'm ashamed. But but I feel all of this in some way will fuel something deeper in society. Where, I don't want to get into the world of psychological problems, but I feel like brain rot will become a buzzword.
I think it probably already has, hasn't it?
Yeah.
What did it emerge halfway through last year? I think was the first time I heard it, and I think but it's a very real thing. I think,
yeah.
And you can. I mean, you admitted earlier. You said I do it. I definitely do it.
Yeah.
I love a cat video.
Yeah, but it's almost like each video's got to be funnier than the last one. It's got to be more extreme. It's got to be more violent. It's got to be this, that, the other. Yeah. It's out there, isn't it? It goes back to my idea of the sort of this soup of content that's out there for people to consume, and where's the stuff that matters anymore?
Exactly. I do worry, and we're all we've all got children. I'm thinking, Christ, what. Their brains are supremely impressionable at this age. It's like a sponge, isn't it? Evolving and changing, and actually, all I'm doing, or we're doing, is feeding them crap. That's what we're doing, isn't it?
I worry about news being consumed in 30-second TikTok posts.
Yeah,
and that definitely is. You cannot get context on a story in 30 seconds on TikTok, and I do worry about that. But I don't see a problem with them scrolling through a few cat videos.
What, for 4 hours?
I certainly wouldn't do 4 hours of it. There's too much football on the television. My brain rot is just sport. I just watch too much sport anyway, so,
But, I mean, it was probably 15 years ago that we were training journalists to write shorter articles, so that, because we worked out that people, wouldn't read beyond the fourth paragraph or something like that because their attention spans were shrinking. And there's evidence, isn't there, that the general...
they've not got longer, have they?
No, it's got shorter and shorter, and I can see that in my own behaviour, and you can see it in all the content that's being produced now.
How short does it go?
Yeah,
I watched this great video the other day. It was a second long. I loved it.
Dragged on a bit. Okay, so I think brain rot is definitely a thing already. It just is, and social media is not going to make it any better, is it? So my final thing is, I genuinely think that Pep has probably got to the point where he's had enough for the moment, and my last prediction is a specific one, and I think he will leave Man City within this year. He's had personal problems outside football, but also Man City need a complete rebuild, and I think I recognise what happened at kind of Barcelona and Bayern, and he's going to say, I need a break. So that is my sporting prediction for the year.
Are you going to put money on that? You probably get odds on that.
Yeah, I don't think we'll get long odds. I don't think it's that outrageous a prediction, but I would definitely say that because Man City needs I think I'd get longer odds on who's going to be next, and I think it'll be Iraola from Bournemouth who will be the next Man City manager.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's great. He's done an amazing job at Bournemouth. So there you go. That's a way of finishing conversation, isn't it?
What an amazing turnaround in Man. How quickly have Man City fallen apart?
It's amazing, isn't it?
So in terms of what was a absolutely relentless and ruthless winning machine, and I know very little about football, as you know, but it appears to me it's just collapsed overnight.
And it's players get to a certain age and they start to struggle, and it feels a bit younger nowadays. That feels around sort of 29, 30 nowadays, whereas in the old days it used to be 32, 33, with some notable exceptions, with Salah still pressing on and being brilliant and stuff. But it does feel around 30. Belgium in the last World Cup were nowhere near as good, and it's because their team are ageing and stuff. But also they've lost Rodri early this season, and who would have guessed Man City were a one-man team? But it seems like they're a one-man team, basically.
I've also got a sneaky suspicion that Guardiola's methods are so intense that players, and I know it, there's churn in a player team, but I think players can
suffer
only
from burnout,
a little bit, yeah. Can only deal with that level of intensiveness for a number of seasons, maybe before the words stop meaning anything.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's happening because there's clearly injuries and other stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised if his candle is starting to extinguish. I think.
Yeah, let's get him in as England manager. If Tuchel doesn't win the next World Cup, we'll get him as England manager. So with that, I think it is time for us to round up because we've overrun in comparison to normal, but I think we knew we were going to do that today anyway. So let's wrap that up for this time. By the way, should have said at the beginning, this was recorded on the 3rd of February 2025. Should have phoned that in at the beginning. And please do like and subscribe, Stop the Press. We need some followers as well as listeners. We're getting there, but we need some followers as well as listeners. So tell your friends and tell the public generally and get them listening to three old guys twittering on about journalism. Until next time, we will say goodbye. Bye for now.
Bye.